Thank you. So, welcome to the CWI and the Science Park. CWI is the birthplace of the internet the open internet in Europe. 1988 November, the very first open internet connection in Europe opened here on the top floor. I happened to be the first user of the open internet because the guy who set it up is in the room next to me, and he knocked on my door and he said, "The internet's up," and I said, "Yes." And I logged into a computer in New York and said, "Yes, it's working, thank you very much." And that was the moment that the internet happened in Europe. Since then, the internet we connected in those days, and when I say we, I'm talking about 5 of us who used it, via a 64 kilobit line that was open 24 hours a day to the United States. But since then, it's doubled more or less every year. So that huge building that you might have seen without any windows, that's the current internet connection here, the fastest in the world. It's I think it broke through 13 terabits per second recently. So it's the fastest internet switch in the world. So anyway, welcome. Thank you for being here. This is a hands-on tutorial. I didn't used to do hands-on tutorials, but then people at this conference said that it would be a useful thing to do, and this is now my 5th hands-on tutorial, which means that you do have to install a small piece of software. If you go to that link, which is cwi.nl/Steven/xforms/generic, then that will give you an archive that you can unpack somewhere and run the server, which is necessary for some of the exercises at least. I'm not going to wait for you to do that, though. I'm going to just get straight on. Yeah, it's a new tutorial. It's the first time that I've given it, so I'm more than happy to get feedback about where you found things difficult. It does, because it's an advanced tutorial, it does assume that you already know something about XForms, although I'm sure that most of you are smart enough to pick up those things as you go. There's more material in this tutorial than we can do in 1.5 hours, but it's designed for studying at home as well, so that you can carry on if we don't finish it. So the idea behind this tutorial is that I build, of course, a lot of XForms applications, and I began to notice that even though they were very different in what they did, there was a certain structure to all of them that was very similar. And so I sort of gave myself the challenge, could I make a generic application that covered all those applications with just small changes? Small changes to the CSS, small changes to the XForm. And I found I could. I thought, oh, well, that would be a good subject then for a tutorial. And so that's what we're going to do. But we're going to do it by first making an application and then slowly making it more and more generic. To start, I struggled for a while to think of a good application to begin with, but then I thought something nicely self-referential would be to make a simple, quick reference application for XForms. So, as it happened, I already had the data, and that's the data that describes all the elements, attributes, functions, and everything that's in XForms. I should warn you that this is XForms 2.0, so in other words, the new version of XForms that we're building. So not all of these elements will be in XForms, in the XForms that you're using now, and it's also not the most recent version, but I'll be updating that in the future. But in any case, most of this stuff is there. And you'll be able to use almost all of it. There's 1 or 2 things that are not yet in the implementation that you've got. So we have our data. It's an XML document that contains a number of entry elements, and each entry has a class that tells you the thing that it's describing, for instance, an element. and then it's got a name and then a number of sub-elements that tells you about the attributes and the content. So the first thing we're going to do, and the reason behind this bit of the tutorial, is to show you how to display a document that you don't know the structure of, and that's part of the genericity of this application, that we want it to work on any data, that we don't want it to have a particular form. So here we've got the instance where we got our data, so that's in data.xml, and then we're going to output the root element's name, the local name of the root element at the top. That's that label. And then we're going to repeat over all the entries. Later on you'll see how to change that into something else. But we're going to repeat over every entry. We're going to output the attributes, the local name and its value. And then repeating over the subchildren of each entry, we're going to output the local name and its content. And if we do that, then we get something that looks like this. Now, it's not particularly beautiful yet, but that's where we're going to get to. So what you see is actually each new entry starts with @class, because every element only has a class, every entry only has a class attribute, and then a number of subchildren. Well, this is not very useful because the problem is not actually a problem, but a repeat by default displays its content on a new line. And that's controlled by CSS, and that's one of the things that we're going to learn today, is how to use CSS together with XForms. And I haven't treated that before in earlier XForms tutorials. So in CSS, each repeat item has display block, which means that it effectively comes on a new line. We can change that by adding CSS to make repeat items have display inline, so that then they are displayed inline. So there we have our style element, and it says a .xforms repeat item has display inline. Now, this makes it a little bit easier to discern the structure. What you'll see is now that we have a repeat over the attributes, so you have the class just on one line, and then we have a repeat over the elements, and so those all turn up on a single line. It's a little easier to discern the structure, but what we're now going to do is, for every entry, and we're going to put within the repeat over the entry elements, we're going to add a class there. We're going to add an entry that says there's a thin black solid line at the bottom border of every entry element. And now we can see a line between every element, every entry in our data. Now, the last thing we're going to do is make this pretty. Now that we've understood what the structure is and what it looks like, what we're going to do is, when we output each of those sub-elements, we're going to give it a class, which is the local name of that element. So in other words, each sub-element of an entry has a class of that name. So we're outputting the value of that element with a class of the name of that element. And we can now add CSS rules that say how we would like each sub-element of an entry to be displayed. So for instance, the common element is going to be colored green, the attribute element is going to be colored blue, a parameter is also going to be blue, and a content element is going to be colored red. And I've added commas after commons and attributes. So if we do that, now all of a sudden we can see the common attributes and the particular attributes. Common attributes are colored now in green, and the particular attributes are colored in blue, and the content of the element is colored in red. So we can see more at a glance what the structure is. So now we come to our first exercise. What we're going to do is just to get started. Sorry, I heard my phone buzz and that got to the microphone, so I'll move my phone. Your first exercise is a very simple one. The idea now is that I talk for a short while, then then you do something for a short while, and we keep going like that. So what you're going to do is move the CSS to a separate file. So we're going to move the CSS out of that document into a separate file. So there are two hints you need. First, in the head element of the file, you need a link to the file with rel equals star sheet type equals text CSS. You also need to add this line, CSS conversion no. That's talking to the XForms processor, just saying that we want the CSS to be retained as it is. To get the copy of the form, I'm assuming you went to that link that I gave you earlier. You right-click on the source link and save link as and save it somewhere. Well, in fact, it's not somewhere. You save it in the directory called XForms where you unpacked the server. And then to run it, you can use this link, which is also, you should also have on your machine already. So the file is called display.xhtml. And if you want to display it using the server that you're running, then just use that link and you'll be able to see it. And then do the exercise. Is that clear? Go. Okay, so the next step is we've now displayed all that data, and we're going to add a search field to the XForms. So for that, we need a new instance for the search string. So underneath the existing instance in the file, we add instance ID equals Q. For instance, I've just called it Q for query. And that contains an XML document that has a single field Q. And then we add, before the display in the body, an input control for the search string. So we say input incremental equals true, which means that as you type it, it will have an effect. We have the ref to that new search string place, and with some label like search. And then we change the display where it said repeat ref equals entry to add this little bit here, where we just say we only display the entries that contain the lowercase, where the lowercase of the entry contains the lowercase of what's been typed in the search string. So if we do that, then we already get quite a usable, if I type in instance, then you see it immediately responding to what I type, and then that just reveals all elements, and other things, functions, that contain the word instance. So we've already got quite a usable application for searching for stuff within the XForms data, and that gives you your next exercise, which is to add a trigger to clear the search box. So that is to say, after that search box there, I want a little button that if I click it, it just empties the search string. Yes. Yeah. And then below that you have two Q elements. I have two Q elements. There's a Q element XML. Yeah, that's the root, and the root name you can change. You can make it search or admin or anything. I've just kept it Q there. The root element of an instance is hardly ever used, so it can usually be anything that you choose. Data, admin.
This instance queue thing in the ref, the yellow box below, returns the root element, not the document node of the instance.
So when I say, for instance, ref instance queue, it sets the contents context to the root element of that.
Not the document node.
The document node.
Yeah.
Not the document. No, the root element.
Yeah.
The root element.
Okay.
Yeah. That's exactly right. So you almost never have to say, I mean, you have the option, you could say slash, Q in many cases, but maybe that's a critique of this already, that I shouldn't have used so many Qs there. So what you need is a trigger. It's called a trigger. Yeah. And that has a child label.
I will Google.
Maybe I've assumed, maybe you haven't done the beginner's tutorial. Too long ago. Okay, all right. So you need a trigger which has a child label, and then it has one other child which is an action that the trigger does when it's clicked on. And in this case, you want to set its set value. It's an element called set value. And it has a ref, which is the instance q/q, the thing that you want to set it. And since you want to set it to empty, then it's just an empty element. But you've got one more attribute on the set value, and that's which event you want to respond to. And that is, and I will write it down over here, although this isn't very fair for the Zoom people, EV:event. So this is on set value. EV:event equals, and then this DOM, capital DOM activate. Set value, yeah, and then ref equals instance q/q. So it's an empty element because it's the content of this element that sets that gets put in this place. So we're setting this instance value when we get a DOM activate. And DOM activate is the event that a browser sends to a button when you click on it. So it's trigger, label, and X, and then set value, EV:event is DOM activate, and then /trigger. Okay? And if you go to the next chapter, so after the search, if you go to the next chapter, you will see it's already there, and so you can actually do a view source. Because every chapter is followed by a chapter where the exercise has been done. So for every exercise, the next chapter, you can do view source to see what the answer was.
The name of this first attribute of set value, the ref? Is
Ref.
that ref, yeah.
Move on. So we're going to move on now. So what the next step is to add the ability to look at a single element in detail. So what we're going to use is the switch element, and the switch element allows you to switch between different views in the data. So we've got two cases, one where we view everything, and so that's where the stuff that we've already got, we just put all of that inside there. And then case view 1 is where we add the new stuff for just looking at a single element. To switch between the two, we use a trigger, a trigger with, that uses the toggle action. In the view one case, to get back to the view all, it's just a simple case of toggling the view all case. And in the case of the view alls, going from view all to view one, we have to do a bit more work. So let's just look at the simple case. So here you've got a trigger with a label view all and a toggle that toggles the view all case, and again in exactly the same way using the EV event DOM activate. So that's the simple case, and that will go in the view one case to go back to the view all case. To view a single element will take a little bit more work. We're going to add a trigger in front of every single entry that gets displayed that allows you to click on that so that you can look at that one entry. So what we do is going to set a value selected. So we're going to add selected to our instance queue. That's just an integer. And the current element, we just count the number of preceding siblings. When we click on that button, we count the number of the preceding siblings plus one, and we set to value the selected value, and then we toggle the case, the view one case, and then the view one entry. In the case for that, well, we're now just going to look at that one element. So we've got our instance data and any element that's got the position of the selected value. And then we're going to output the class, and then for each element under that, we're going to output its local name and its value. So this is what that looks like. So for instance, if I find my mouse, if I click on that, my mouse is not responding very well, I think. If I click on, that, then what I get is a view on that single entry of class model, name model. But if I go back to view all, and I click on instance, then it's got some common attributes. It's got a source or a resource attribute, and a response media type, and then it can have any content. So that's how to view one element and go back to viewing all. Click here. So another exercise. It's a bit ugly. You've got the freedom to do what you want when displaying one of those, a single element. So this is just. So improve the view trigger. So at the moment I've just got view, but you can do lots of nice things. If you use appearance equals minimal on the trigger, then it doesn't display it as a button, but displays it just as a bit of text. And then you can use some nice symbol, for instance, a magnifying glass or something. And you can see, if you go to that nice website, ampwhat.com, it gives you a way of searching through all Unicode characters. It's a site that I use all the time for finding Unicode characters for display purposes. So this section, it's 6 minutes to the coffee break. So I suggest that you just use this to the coffee break to do this, and then we'll have coffee and then come back again. All right, I'm assuming that you're okay with that last exercise, and that we can move on. And if you weren't okay, then in the next exercise I'll just come and check up. So we're now going to add another case to our switch that will allow us to edit an entry. So this looks very similar to the view one case. Except that we're using input rather than output elements. But there is a slight difference in that to make it easier, we're not going to edit the data in the source document, but we're going to copy the one element that we want to edit somewhere else, edit that, and then you can cancel, and then nothing will have been changed, or you can save, and then it will save that, that edit back into the original. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to create a trigger, a button, as it were, to edit a single, to edit a case. We'll start this one from the view 1 case, so you go to the view 1, and there'll be a button edit. And what we would do there is we copy the selected value. We've already got a value for selected, so the value that we're looking at, we copy that somewhere else into a new instance. So we have to add an instance there where we're going to put the thing that we're going to edit. So we need to add another instance to the model, and then we have this, this button in order to edit it. And now we add the case in the switch for the editing, and it looks almost exactly like the output version for viewing 1 case, except everywhere we've got output, instead we put input. And it's more or less exactly the same. We might also want to insert and delete elements from the thing we're editing. So we can add 2 triggers, one to add another element, and one to delete the current element. But those are very simple. So again, you've got a trigger with a label. You can now see another possible child of trigger, a hint, which if you hover over it, it says what that button does. And then the action, which in the one case inserts, inserts a copy of the current element, and the other that deletes the current element. So that's the bit where we're doing the input, and then right at the bottom, there are 2 options. We either want to cancel what we've done, and then we just go back to view 1, or we want to save the edits that we've done, and what we do is we insert our copied data that we've edited. We insert that back into our data and delete the one that we've edited. So we just insert it and delete the old one, and then we toggle back to view 1 again. So that's what this looks like. I'm using a rather old browser here, so it doesn't have all the font, all the Unicode characters. But if I click on one of these, for instance, view 1, then I can go back to view all, or I can edit it. My mouse is very sluggish. Come on, go up, go up, go up. Yeah, yeah, and now a little bit to the right. Come on. Too far. Yeah, good. Right. So this is the view 1 case, and then I say I want to edit this. That will copy this value into the extra instance, allows me to do something. Well, let's delete this this entrant, and then save. My mouse! This is terrible. I don't know why. Come on now. Yes. All right. And then I save it, which puts that back into the data. It's deleted that one attribute, and then I can go back to view all. All right. So now we've got the possibility to view all, to search in it. You can to view a particular element and to edit an element. So now we're on to your next exercise, and that is to say that an entry has all these sub-elements, but one of those sub-elements has itself sub-elements, and that's the attribute. The attribute element has children name and type. Now, when you view an element, if you just do an output on attribute, then it just concatenates those 2 fields together, so that was fine. But now we really want to edit those 2 fields. So an easy solution will be to treat attribute specially, but we're thinking about this being a generic solution. So we're going to do a generic solution. So this is the exercise. So this is now looking at the view element. We've got repeat over over the elements, the sub-elements of an entry, and we output the local name and its value. What we can do is this. If that element hasn't got any children, then we output its value. So that's what that first output says. Ref equals dot, count star equals 0. So if it hasn't got any children, we only output its value. If it has got children, though, then we do a repeat over them. So we only output that first one in the case that it's got no children, and we only do this repeat in the case it has got children. If it's got no children, then that repeat will do nothing. So if it's got children, then we output the child, the local name and its value. So that's how you would do it for display. And what you've got to now do is add that into the edit section, where every output is replaced with an input. So your exercise now is to change the edit case so that it can deal with sub-elements like this. I've used count star equals 0 just because it's obvious what that means, but in fact you can actually say not star as completely equivalent instead of that count star equals 0. Hey, there's I should be giving a tutorial now. So that's your, oh, I've gone too far. So that's your task now, to add the sub-elements into the edit case. Clear? Go. All right. So you'll see in the next chapter that I've already got an example that does what was required. So here, if I view one of the bind element and then edit that, then here you can see I can add a new name. On that shouldn't be allowed, but add new attributes. I can delete them, and here I've got an attribute that's got a name and a type. So that's what it should look like. Okay, so the next bit is that having edited the data, we now want to save it, because it's no point in just having it in the program if we don't save it. So for that, we need a submission, and the submission says the thing that we want to save is the instance called data. We want to save it to a file, that's resource, equals data.xml, so we're saving it back to the original data. The method that we want to use is put, which is why you're using a server that accepts put. Validate false, we don't want it to do any data validation, and replaces none says that if the server sends anything back, we just want it ignored. So we want to activate this so that when we change the data, it does this save. And you do that with an action called send. What you can see here now is that to group a number of actions together, you've got an action element that contains all the things that you want to do. So when this button, the save button, which we've already got, gets activated, we do the insert, the delete, and then we ask this submission to be saved, and then we toggle back, sorry, that submission to be sent, and then we toggle back to the view 1. Now, you should always check that the submission gets done, and you do that by adding 2 actions as children of the submission element. One for when the submission was successful, that's XForms submit done at the bottom there, and one when it's unsuccessful, which is XForms submit error. So if the submission element gets that event, it means either the submission has been successful or not successful. So in the case of our error, I've added a message element to the instance queue there. So here we're looking at this, and what we're doing is we're setting a value to that message instance that just says we haven't saved the data, and we can get the reason that the server said that it hasn't been saved. You get a response reason. But you can also do a message which pops up a dialog box, or actually a monologue box, because all you can do is read it and say OK. And it says, and it gives you lots of detail. So that's the point of this. The error type, the error message, the status codes, for instance, 404 or whatever, the reason phrase, so the text, a file not found, and the URI, what you were trying to save to, just so you can see what you were trying to do. So this is quite useful when a submission fails, that you get the information about why it's failed. On the other hand, if the submission has been successful, then we just blank out the message. There's no message, no error message to display. So there's our message element, which we've added to the queue instance. And we say it's only relevant if it's non-empty. So if it's empty, it's not relevant, and that means that on this output here, which references that message, if message is not relevant, then this output doesn't get done, so you don't see anything. But if message has got a value in it, then that will be displayed. So we can see that happening here now because I'm using a browser, a server that doesn't do puts. So if I say edit that and then save, I get my message telling me what's happened, and it says resource error, status code 405, method not allowed. And then up pops my error message saying not saved, method not allowed. And that's because I'm using a server here that doesn't accept put to let you see it working. So your exercise is to do this bit and to add a bit of CSS to make the message come up in red. And while you're testing, just put some value in the message element so that it's always going to be relevant, and so it's always going to show up. You don't have to do the submissions, in other words. You can just make sure this is working by putting some value into message. Okay, clear? All right, good, go.
Could you explain again what this bind statement does?
What?
What this bind statement does?
The bind statement.
Yes, so this...
Yeah, so within the model, you have a number of instances, and the instances have a number of children, as it were. And the bind statement you can map to any element in any instance or attribute, and you can give that element or attribute certain properties. You can give it a type. You can give it restrictions or relevance, which affects how the program works. So relevance, for instance, is used for whether a value gets displayed or not. So you can give it a condition under which it's displayable, and under which it's relevant. So an example would be a credit card. If you were paying for a bill and you chose credit card, then the credit card details could be displayed. But if you chose cash, then they would disappear, as it were, automatically. Yeah.
And this relevance property is somewhere explicitly used, or is it the system which decides automatically?
Well, in this case, relevance is used, for instance, for attached to controls. If it's not relevant, then the control doesn't do anything. It sort of, the control disappears. But if you save the data, in general, non-relevant values don't get saved with the data unless you do something special. All right, I'd like to go on so that we do one more chapter before the end of this. So this is very similar. We've now learned how to save the data, but since we're overwriting the data file, it would be a good practice to create a backup at startup in case of disaster. So what we do is in this case, although your exercise is to do something differently, we have this action to send the backup submission when we get the event XForms ready. XForms ready happens once when you run an XForms at startup. When it's started up and everything is ready to go, it sends that event and you can respond to it in some way. And in our case, we're going to back up the data. So the submission is very similar to the submission in the save case. We've got a different ID. We're going to save it to a different file, backup.xml, but otherwise it's very much same with an error message and a no error message if it's been done. So here you can see it already working because again this browser this server doesn't accept put, so my backup failed, but it's immediately displayed it in red as it was meant to do. So your exercise now is to do that backup, but only when the data gets changed. You don't need to do a backup until somebody actually changes the data. If you're just browsing the data, then you don't need a backup. So the version that you just saw, it does it at startup, and now you've learned how to do something at startup. If you're only browsing the data, you don't need to do the backup until you do the change. So what you're going to do is do the backup the first time a change is made. So that's when you click on the Save button, you're going to add there an event, an action to do a backup. You do it just before the insert and delete. So you do the backup, you do the insert and delete, and then the save. And you record that the backup's been done so that you don't have to do it on subsequent saves. And I guess since you don't all know this, let me find an example where it's got an if. Can I find an if somewhere around here? Basically, on the action where you do the send, so for instance, here you've got send submission equals restore. You can say if and then equals and then quotes and a condition. So you can do, in other words, you can do actions conditionally based on a condition, and so you do the send if backup needs to be done or something just before the save. Is the exercise clear? This will be your last exercise. There are 10 minutes left, and then I'll just, in 10 minutes' time, I'll just sort of wrap up and tell you what you can do at home with the rest of the tutorial. Yes.
Where should we put this send EV and is XForms ready?
So there's the button that does save, right? In there. So when you do a save, you do the backup, but only if the backup needs to be done. Only if it's the first time a backup's been done this session.
But let's say, for starters, I just want to have a backup made as soon as I load the form.
Oh yeah, then you do that in the model. Then you have send event equals XForms ready. Yeah. So that's this one. If you want to just do it at startup, then you send the backup submission when you get the event XForms ready, and you put that in the model, because the event gets sent to the model. So I'm going to wrap up now. There's a coffee break now of 15 minutes, so you can continue working if you want, but I'll just wrap up about what we've done so far. So we're approximately halfway through the tutorial now. What would have happened after that is, having backed up the data, now it's possible to restore it, so we would add a trigger to allow you to restore the data if you wanted to go back to your original data if you messed up. how to add an entry. So we've only been able to look at the data up to now and edit it, but you might want to add a new entry. You might want to delete an entry. And then the last thing is something that happens to me is that I have an application which I use on my computer at home, then I go out and I use it on my phone. I go home and then the data is out of sync because I've changed it on my phone, but my computer, my desktop doesn't know that. So what the checking before saving does is make sure the data hasn't changed outside of the application. So if you use Emacs, you might know about this, because if you try to edit something that's changed on the data file, then it will say, do you really want to edit this because it's changed on the file? And then you can reload the file. So that's what the checking does. Then we would talk about how to make it more generic, and then the last exercise was actually to turn it into a different application. The one that I suggested was dealing with travel claims, so journeys that you've made, journeys that you've claimed and not yet received, and journeys that you've claimed, made, claimed, and received, using all the same structure and just making slight changes to it. Okay, so we're done. There's now another 20 seconds left of this tutorial. So any last questions? We've got a coffee break, you've got 15 minutes, and then the next tutorial starts. All right. I've learned from this as well. So the next version of the tutorial, I'll rewrite it so that it doesn't make such an assumption about the level of XForms that you already know, so that everything gets explained a bit more beforehand. But thank you for your inputs as well.